Let's get this straight now. I never f***ed anybody over in my life. Didn't have it coming to me. You got that? All I have in this world is my balls and my word. And I don't break them for no one. Do you understand? That piece of shit up there, I never liked him. I never trusted him. For all I know, he had me set up and had my friend Angel Fernandez killed. But that's history. I'm here, he's not. Do you want to go on with me? You say it. You don't? Then you make a move.
The title is everything to me. You know, when me and Ghost, we sat around and we knew that when we was making this album, we had to come with a mean title. And I think it was a rhyme that was said that we was writing, because we was doing a lot of writing together. You know, just reviewing our bars and just kind of like digging off each other. And at one time in the rhyme, it says something about only built for Cuban Linx who pull stings. So right there, it hit me. It was like, yo, only built for Cuban Linx. And you know, when you see with those on, you know those ain't your everyday. Those is different. They will come knock on your door. The main thing was the shine and the lock that couldn't be broken.
Raekwon! Yeah, we first saw him surface on St. Valentine's Day. Since then, they've been politicking with the most organized crime family, whacking anyone who stood in their way. Now, Chef Raekwon, the disciple of the 36th Chamber, has cooked up a tasty new joint, only built for Cuban Linx.
Since we had a long intro, I'm just going to get straight to it. If you like the content, you should like, comment, and subscribe to help the channel grow. Also, follow my Instagram too. That would be greatly appreciated. You guys can always reach out and just show me some love. It's all good. Let me know where you're tuning in from. Represent where you're from, especially if you're representing New York. Comment down below your favorite song or songs on the album. Most importantly, comment down below what it was like for you when this album first dropped, because those are my favorite comments. Without further ado, let's get into the video. The year is 1995 and Raekwon is gearing up to drop his debut studio album. Upon dropping an album, he would be the third member of the Wu-Tang Clan to drop a solo album after the group's debut album. Method Man had the first solo album out of the group, with him dropping TICAL in November of 1994. ODB would be the second one, with him dropping Return to the 36 Chambers, the dirty version, in March of 1995. This left some pressure for Raekwon to be the third one to release an album, especially with the standards of being a Wu-Tang Clan member being so high and how monstrous the group's debut album ended up being for the group. Meth and ODB solo albums also had success on their own. Now, I've actually talked about Raekwon's debut album on my channel before, but the video was only like 10 minutes long, and I dropped it alongside my video on Supreme Clientele, which I'm also thinking about redoing. I felt like Only Built for Cuban Linx needed to be discussed in further detail, and this is why I'm here today. Recording sessions for the album began in late 1994 and extended throughout the halfway point of 1995 in RZA's basement studio in Staten Island. This was the same studio where many of Wu-Tang's earlier albums were recorded. In regards to the original recording intentions of the album, RZA said they had wanted to go to Barbados, but when they got to Barbados, the racism was so crazy. It was on some slave mentality. The blacks was being treated like nothing. They stopped back and everything was recorded in my basement. No engineer, no assistant engineer. I did everything on that stuff. The only two albums I did with nobody effing with me was Links and Liquid Swords. I was on a mission. The reason why Raekwon and Ghostface wanted to go to the Bahamas was to get away and let their minds be free and escape all the turbulence of life. They thought that Barbados would be tranquil and was somewhere you could go just to get a peace of mind and feel like you're by yourself and meditate. So this trip was supposed to get him and Ghost to be more focused. As RZA explained, this trip wouldn't accomplish what Ray and Ghost set out for it to be. Ghost would further say, there was kind of like prejudice over there. They wanted us to leave. They didn't want us to wear fatigues over there and all of this other stuff. And it wasn't just a white man that was prejudiced over there. It was like your own kind that was working for the white man. It was crazy over there. They told on us and we had to leave. But it was good though because we slid to Miami and that's where we got most of our darts at right there. You know how it was in Miami in 1995? They still on Scarface stuff. So as Ghost said, after leaving Barbados, the duo would then travel to Miami where they would further write for the album. As Raekwon said in the intro, him and Ghost were writing together a lot during this time and that's why Ghost is so heavily featured on the album. With Ray being the third one up in the Wu-Tang Clan, he was definitely nervous and knew the pressure he was under to deliver a great album. Ray was nervous because he wanted people to understand him. Though he was nervous, he still had a lot of confidence due to his background and the people around him achieving what he wanted to achieve in the game. He looks at this album as a direct reflection of himself and was really bringing his life story to the table. He was just letting the world know that he was coming from a reality perspective. This was the goal, to describe what he had been and lived through while bringing that to fruition, and he wanted it to be authentic. If you're familiar with the Wu-Tang Clan, then you're probably familiar with RZA's 5-year plan. To simplify this plan, basically RZA made a deal with the owner of Loud Records, Steve Rifkin. The Wu-Tang Clan was signed as a group to Loud Records, but however, each individual member were free agents. RZA wanted to take the group to #1 in 5 years, and he wanted the members to sign to other labels to increase their reach. At the time of Only Built for Cuban Linx, Method Man was with Def Jam and ODB went to Geffen Records. Raekwon would ultimately stay with Loud Records as a solo act. The reason why was due to the label's infrastructure. This was very important to him because the label believed in him. Loud to me was always just as powerful as Def Jam. Def Jam had the polish behind them and Loud didn't have that polish factor, but it still had all the proper mechanics. When you sit there and you think about labels and the power they bring to the table, when you understand what culture is about, that's what I was excited about, to get them to understand me. They knew that at the end of the day, this is a real hip hop kid, someone who lives the culture and understands it, and I felt like they knew exactly how to deal with my personality and my swing at the plate. So I never really compared it to Def Jam because they were more the Mercedes-Benz of the industry and Loud was more like the Audi. They had the Mighty Wu up there, they had Mobb Deep. So I felt at home, and for them to call on me, I felt like they was watching me really closely from the beginning, starting with 36 Chambers. Then they put their chips on me. Raekwon would also play a pivotal part of RZA's plan in another sense because RZA had a separate vision for different members and their target demographics. For GZA, he saw him reaching toward the intellectual people in college. Ray and Ghost were to bring the gangsters in, and Method Man was supposed to attract the children and women. GZA has said that it wasn't his personal goal to reach that specific demographic, and Method Man didn't necessarily agree with the position of attracting the ladies. But a typical day in the recording for Only Built for Cuban Linx consisted of Ray coming into the studio, smoking weed, and watching Prime RZA work his magic. The goal was to make a cinematic album, and storytelling is one of Ray's strong suits. During breaks in recording and writing for the album, Ray would watch classic movies. One of these movies him and RZA drew a lot of inspiration from was the John Woo movie, The Killer. You can hear the score from this film played throughout Only Built for Cuban Linx. Raekwon actually mentioned this movie back in 1993 on Wu-Tang's first album. At the beginning of the track 7 Chamber, Raekwon asked Method Man where his killer tape was at because it was missing. Other movies that inspired the album are Scarface and The Godfather, which are among Raekwon's favorite films, with The Godfather being his favorite. He also has a lot of love for mob movies, which is very evident upon listening to Only Built for Cuban Linx. The album would pioneer the mafioso rap style with rap legend legend Kool G Rap being noted as one of, if not the first people to start the mafioso rap genre. Plus, Staten Island, where Ray and members of the Wu-Tang Clan represent, is known for its mob activity. Method Man is one of the Wu-Tang members who has spoken about Staten Island being a place where mobsters are known to live. Upon listening to Only Built for Cuban Linx though, you will hear the difference in production compared to other Wu-Tang Clan albums before it. Due to Raekwon's storytelling, mobster-minded approach, and mafioso rap type music that he was doing, RZA set out for Only Built for Cuban Linx to play like scenes in a crime movie. The earlier Wu-Tang works were much more grittier and rougher in sound, so RZA worked on a more polished sound that was slower and more layered. He used strings, piano loops, and vocal samples from kung fu movies and mafia films to get the sound that we know today. As for the inspiration behind the name of the album, I played that clip at the beginning of the video with Raekwon explaining the origins of the name. But did you know that the original name of the album could have landed Raekwon in a lot of trouble? Originally, the album was supposed to be called Wu Gambinos. Steve Rifkin's father, who was connected with the mafia, got a phone call from the Gambino crime family, and the caller said that the family didn't want their name on the album. Despite the warnings, Ray was adamant about naming the album Wu Gambinos, but ultimately decided not to go through with it because, I mean, like, literally he was dealing with the mob. So I mean, very smart decision to not go through with it. This isn't no like street gang, this was way different, and the mob definitely does not play. Either way, he ultimately named the song Wu Gambinos on the album and came up with the Only Built for Cuban Linx name for the album title instead. The first single off of the album would be Heaven and Hell, which was released in October of 1994. This song would appear on the soundtrack for the movie Fresh. The second single off of the album would be Criminology, which was released in June of 1995. The B-side of that record would be the song Glaciers of Ice. They both would chart at number 43 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. Finally, the album would be released in August of 1995. The album would peak at number 4 on the Billboard 200 chart, selling roughly 130,000 copies in its first week. Upon release, the album was dubbed the Purple Tape because the original cassette's plastic was entirely purple. Raekwon marked the tape distinctively as a reference to drug dealers' methods of tagging their product to distinguish it from others. For example, in the movie American Gangster, they used blue magic to distinguish it from other heroin. In response to why the tape was purple, Raekwon would say, "I wanted to make sure that the average cat that would listen to it had something special in his cassette deck. Like out of all his tapes, my stuff was private. My stuff was for special people. Like you had to be somebody to rock that. So I wanted to separate that from everybody else's." The Purple Tape is just classic, and I recently saw a video of Raekwon signing a copy of the original Purple Tape, and them things go for a lot. They go for thousands of dollars online in mint condition. Did you know though that originally the tape wasn't going to be purple and instead was going to be green? In an interview, Raekwon would elaborate on this. "At first, I was going to do it green because green is my favorite color. I like olive green, but they couldn't do that color. Next thing you know, they was like blah, 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 and purple. And I was like, a lot of dudes might think purple is for girls, but I like the color because it stood out. So I was like, F it, let's go with purple." I still think green for the tape would have been cool, but purple is one of my favorite colors, and it just adds to the lore of this album. I mean, when you think of the greatest albums of all time, this has to be in the discussion. Everything about it is just amazing. What more can you ask for? A dope name, intriguing lore behind it, phenomenal writing, superb production, timeless songs, has impact, and it has influenced many artists. Most importantly, the replay value of this album is insane. I've seen comments from many people saying that they bought this album several times throughout the years because it's that good. This is back before streaming and albums weren't cheap. There's a video of Pusha T talking about Only Built for Cuban Linx, and he said that throughout the years, he bought the album 7 times. He would also reference the Purple Tape on his album Daytona, where he referred to that album as his Purple Tape. The influence Only Built for Cuban Linx has is crazy, and we even see it today with Only Built for Infinity Linx with Quavo and Takeoff, rest in peace, which was released in October of 2022. Quavo told Raekwon it wouldn't be anything short of an honor to carry on the legacy, especially given everything the Wu-Tang Clan did for the culture. Raekwon would give Quavo his blessing to name the record Only Built for Infinity Linx. But this is just one example, and believe me, there are plenty of other examples and influences Only Built for Cuban Linx has had throughout the years. I just can't get enough of this album. Everything is just cool. The slang, the videos, I mean all that. But this will pretty much wrap up the first part of this video where I broke down the history behind Only Built for Cuban Linx dropped. In the second half of the video, I'll break down the album track by track and tell you the history behind the songs. The album starts off with the track Striving for Perfection, which samples the movie The Killer. This intro really sets up the tone of the album with Ghost and Ray conversing. RZA said that the theme of this album is two guys that had enough of the negative life and were ready to move on but had one more sting to pull off. They're tired of doing what they're doing, but they're trying to make this last $250,000. They were set to retire and get their lives together so their kids could grow. We know now that Ray and Ghost are really close, but it wasn't always like this. There were two opposite guys as far as neighborhoods were concerned, with their two respective neighborhoods having hood history with each other. Now there's conflicting information on whether Ghost and Ray actually had beef before the Wu-Tang Clan. Ghost recently said that him and Ray never had beef. One thing that is true is that Ghostface is from Stapleton and Ray is from Park Hill and Staten Island, which have history together as I just mentioned. But Ray and Ghost being from two different neighborhoods and coming together is why RZA used the movie The Killer. The movie The Killer is about the friendship that emerges between an assassin and a detective. They happen to be on two different sides of the law, but they ultimately came together to get things done. RZA would further say that mostly everything said in the spoken interludes is from the movie The Killer on this album. RZA would end up meeting John Woo the same year this album was released, and John Woo would send a letter and was honored that he drew inspiration from this film. John Woo and RZA would become friends, and John Woo began mentoring RZA in film. Striving for Perfection would be more than just a song title for Raekwon. When it came to rapping, he wasn't going to waste his shot, and he thrived to get recognized in the game as the dude who really repped the streets hard. He was striving for perfection because he didn't want to go any other route. The second track on the album would be Knuckleheads, and this is a track where Ray and Ghost were running around and doing what they did to get money. RZA had the idea of U-God getting killed on the song, and speaking of U-God, he would be featured on the song and has given conflicting accounts of how he ended up on the song. Wu-Tang fans would know that U-God is only featured on a couple of songs on Wu-Tang Clan's debut album because he was locked up for a good portion of the making of the album. He would get released but ended up violating his parole and got locked up again. He would be released again and got on the Knucklehead song. The conflicting accounts are that on one hand, in a XXL magazine article about the making of the album, U-God says that he couldn't redo his verse for the song because he got locked up again. Then in U-God's book Raw, he allegedly tells a different story and said that he was out of prison for good at this point and RZA only gave him one take to do his verse. So as you can see, this is where the confusion comes from. The next track on the album would be Knowledge God, and it's an entire Ray solo song. Raekwon would refer to this song as a serious story he wrote. In his mind, it was like he was sitting down writing a letter, but it folded out into a crime scene of what he was gonna do. At the very start of the song, you hear sniffing, which is in reference to that cocaine, but this is something that just happened and was part of a take for this record. Throughout the album, outside of mafia references, you'll also hear a lot of references to the 5% Nation. A lot of Wu-Tang Clan music does, and the word knowledge happens to be number 1 in Supreme Mathematics, while God is number 7. Knowledge God would fade into the track Criminology. This would be RZA's attempt to produce like a DJ to produce a break beat. This was at the request of Ghostface because he wanted the song to sound like a break beat. RZA cites Ghostface Killer's verse on Criminology as the verse that got him recognized. RZA recalled a story of DJ Muggs from Cypress Hill calling him up and saying that Ghostface ripped the track. He definitely did 100%, and he was gliding on that track effortlessly. Ghost wrote his verse in San Francisco. When he spat his verse in his words, it was like he had a battery in his back, with his drink of choice being Ballantine Ale. He has said that he recorded a lot of stuff while he was off the Ballantine Ale. I think that's how you say it, Ballantine, I don't really know. The track starts off with the movie Scarface, and there needed to be something to start off the track heavy, so Scarface was selected. This record would really change Ghost and Ray because they knew this track was something special and dared people to get in their way. The music video for this track would be orchestrated by Raekwon because he wanted Benzes, jewels, and waterfalls in the video. He also would tell Ghostface to not go out and buy gear and instead wear robes, which went on to be a huge part of Ghostface's Ghostface's look. Criminology would bleed into incarcerated Scarfaces. This song was dedicated to people that were locked up. One of Ray's friends had just been sent to prison for a long time, so he wanted something on the album to represent the people inside the belly of the beast. So that's where the incarcerated part came from, but the Scarface part is in reference to whoever was walking around with scars on their face, whether it was $1.50 or even more. For those who don't necessarily know what $1.50 is, it is a large scar or cut across someone's face that needs to be closed by approximately 150 stitches, which is why they call it $1.50. This can occur by someone cutting someone else with a sharp object like a blade or a razor. Raekwon wrote this song in about 15 minutes, and at first RZA wasn't making the beat for Ray. RZA has said that by the time he was making that beat, he was finished with Raekwon because he likes having 13 tracks instead of what went on to be 18 tracks on the album. He thinks that he was making this track for GZA, which makes sense because Liquid Swords would be the next Wu-Tang solo album after Raekwon's. Rainy Days would be the 6th track on the album and went on to be the 4th and final single for the album. This would be one of the records that was written in Barbados. Him and Ghost would write this song by the water due to them having a villa right off of the ocean. It was about 3 or 4 in the morning when the verses were written. The purpose of this track was to give the listener a thought of how dudes in the hood think and how their girls also think. It's definitely one of my favorite tracks off of the album, and RZA feels the same way about this track. This is a track that he put a lot of time into, and it was a real emotional track for him because it was real. And Ghost's verse, when he was talking about how getting the royalties for their music was taking a while, he was not lying. He referenced Divine, who's RZA's brother and was a big part of the business side of the Wu-Tang at this time. RZA, when talking about this track, even echoed that record royalties were taking a while, even though the Wu-Tang Clan had a platinum album out, but were waiting on the checks because they had to feed their families. A person who I feel like makes the track very impactful is the singer Blue Raspberry. Her singing on the song is incredible and really makes the track comes full circle. This would not be her last appearance on this album. Guillotine Swords will be the next track, and Inspector Deck would have an insane verse on this song. This and his verse on the song Triumph are up there for 2 of the greatest verses that I've ever heard in my life. Don't get me wrong, everybody killed their verses because I also think that Ghostface had a stellar verse as well. A really interesting fact about this song is that a piece of the beat for Guillotine Swords was previewed on Method Man's TICAL album on the track Meth vs. Ghost in 1994. About Guillotine Swords, Raekwon has said that he knew for a fact him and Ghost were the first ones to rap about Cristal. Also, upon hearing the track Guillotine Swords, you'll hear the one and only feature from GZA on this album. As to why he didn't appear on the album more, he doesn't know. He thinks that maybe it was because Only Built for Cuban Linx was essentially a Ray and Ghost album, and they were pleased with him just being on one track and filling in a slot. Nonetheless, GZA came in and delivered a great verse. The intro of the track would also sample the movie Shaolin vs. Lama, which is one of RZA's favorite kung fu movies. This wouldn't be the last time that he sampled this movie though. The 8th track on the album would be the remix to the song Can It Be All So Simple. The original version would appear on Wu-Tang's debut album. According to Raekwon, the remix came from when they used to do shows when Enter the Wu-Tang dropped. Him and Ghost used to come out to the part of the beat that plays in the song in the middle of shows. RZA would rework the track, and Ghostface would essentially rap about how he got shot back in the days when he was out of town. The intro of the track sets the scene for this. Shark Dude's Biters would be the 9th track on the album, and it's a skit where Ray and Ghost discuss how rappers be biting or stealing lyrics, styles, or whatever. Ray said that the two weren't trying to start beef, but sometimes when you get in the booth and start saying what you want to say, stuff happens. They were just looking at their competition at the time, and sometimes liquor makes a person feel stronger and things get said. RZA refers to this skit as the end of the first side of the album. With this skit, they were letting people know to not sound like anybody in the Wu-Tang Clan. RZA said that eventually people did bite their style, but back then people knew better because Wu was enforcing and applying pressure to people who did. He didn't name anybody in particular, but he notes that there were a few Method Man clones that popped up. Ghostface would famously say that he didn't want anybody to sound like him on any album. In an interview, Ghostface would say, "I didn't want dudes to sound like me. Basically, we was just wild and starting a lot of trouble. We was airing out at the time. I'm not here to mess around and start throwing out names, but at that time, dudes knew what was going on and who dudes was talking about. You know how Wu came through. At that time, it was on for anybody. We came into the game like F everybody, dudes can't touch this, whatever. That was our mind frame back then. We ran all that stuff. Jails, streets, Brooklyn House, Rikers Island, and up north, Wu-Tang was what was up. So we was just two dudes bugging out off that stuff. God bless the dead. I love Big. He's an effing icon. Even when I saw him out in Cali, I wanted to tell son, yo, let's go ahead and make this record together because I matured throughout the years and at the same time, I recognized good music. We shook hands on some peace stuff, but that was all because they was on their way leaving out. A day or two later, dudes aired them out. Why Ghostface brought up Biggie is because in the skit, he was talking about how dudes were biting off of Nas's album cover for Illmatic. Illmatic would have a picture of Nas when he was little, and Biggie went on to release his debut album, Ready to Die, with the baby on the cover art. Illmatic would release in April of 1994, while Ready to Die was released in September of 1994. About the skit, Nas would say, "I couldn't believe Ghostface said that. I had a picture of young me on the cover, and then Notorious Big, rest in peace, had a picture of a baby that was supposed to be him." Of course, people started comparing because they was comparing us anyway. Biggie would call Nas and ask him if he was messing with the Wu-Tang Clan after he learned about what they said. Nas would further say, "Big called me and he's like, yo, you effing with them Wu dudes? You know they said that stuff, cause me and him was tight." I was like, yo, I mean, that's Ghost. Ghostface is Ghostface. There's no love lost. I didn't know he was gonna say this stuff. He was a little disappointed cause he wasn't trying to bite off my stuff. Just in general, cause he wasn't coming at it like that. If you listen to his album, he tell a whole story and stuff. I didn't look at it like that. It was just competition at that time. It's good that Ghost ended up patching up things with Biggie, but unfortunately, we kind of know what happened afterwards. Biggie would tragically pass away. RP to Biggie. The start of the second half of the album would be the song Ice Water. This track is most notably known for being Cappadonna's debut. Cappadonna was originally supposed to be one of the original members of the Wu-Tang Clan, but Method Man would end up replacing him. He would be locked up and watching as Wu-Tang began to grow. He got out of prison and would end up appearing on this track. According to You God, it was him who got Kappa out of his bed to record his part for the song. He didn't want to come because he was bitter. He was in jail and came home to people he grew up with doing it without him, which You God thinks made him feel bitter. It was You God who got him out of his bed, slapped off all the bitterness, and brought him to the studio. There were other members of the Wu-Tang Clan who rhymed over what would become Ice Water, with Jizza being one of them. Cappadonna managed to knock him and others off of the track. This is something the members of the Wu-Tang laugh about to this day, with Cap knocking Jizza off of the track. Raekwon said that Jizza came sharp and felt robbed a little bit because he got removed. Cappadonna doing this definitely was not an easy task because Jizza is lyrically one of, if not the best members of the Wu-Tang Clan, and there's a reason why he went last on a lot of tracks. RZA would also say that since You God was quote unquote killed in the first half of the album, the second half introduced Cappadonna as a new character. Ice Water would fade into the track Glaciers of Ice. The opening skit to this song was something that Ray and Ghost really wanted to stress because around this time they were really buying Clarks left and right. The two had bumped into a Chinese guy who could dye their shoes. They liked rocking the Clarks because they were comfortable, and according to Ray, nobody in the game was messing with them. RZA has said that the Clark skit is totally how Ghostface is in real life. He recorded the skit while he was in a car. He had a portable DAT to record audio, which RZA made all of the Wu-Tang members get. The reason why is that he felt like there was no telling where they were going to be when an idea hit them. Raekwon would glide on the track in his verse, but interestingly, when he rhymed to Glaciers, it wasn't even on the beat that we know of today. It was the drum part of the beat that he rhymed to. He didn't even like the rhyme that he spit, but everybody else did, and we're telling him that it was good. RZA told Ray to go home and get some rest because he felt that he was bugging. Ray planned to come back the next day and spit a whole new verse, but when he came back, there was a whole new beat with the drums under it. Blue Raspberry was also on this, and she went crazy as per usual. Verbal Intercourse would be the next song and would end up being the 12th track on the album. This track would be significant because Nas would become the first non-Wu-Tang Clan member or affiliated member to feature on a Wu-Tang related album. His verse on the song is referred to as one of the best verses of all time. This track would happen organically because Ray would come out to Queensbridge, where Nas was from, while Nas used to come out to Staten Island. The two would ride around and just hang out all night. They never called each other to work and only called each other to hang out. Somehow they wound up in the studio and RZA had a couple of beats ready. Nas would get on both beats, but the other track has never came out. Nas looks at being on this album as a huge honor and notes Raekwon for being ahead of his time and knew that this album was going to be a classic. Upon hearing the beat for Verbal Intercourse, Nas would try different rhymes and Ray would like the rhyme that Nas would end up using for the song. Nas actually previously used his verse on the song on a song called Deja Vu. Really great Nas song if you've never heard it. Wisdom Body would be the next track on the song, and this would be a solo Ghostface track. This track was going to initially be called Fly Beat-ish instead of Wisdom Body. Ghost would do the track and RZA would keep it in the stash. Raekwon would jump on it, but RZA felt like the track was too personal to Ghost, so Ray was removed. Spot Rushers would be the 14th track on the album, and in the intro to the song, you can hear the Wu-Tang St. Ides commercial. Definitely go watch my video on St. Ides if you haven't yet. It's my most popular video and people love it. Link in the description. But back to Spot Rushers, and RZA wasn't feeling the beat to this at all. It's another beat that RZA was making for GZA because he was done with Only Built for Cuban Linx at this point. He felt like Raekwon saved the song because he aired it out even though he personally didn't like the beat. Now we're going to get into the fan favorite song on the album, which is Ice Cream. This song would be the third single on the album and would reach number 37 on the Billboard Hot 100. Even though this would be Raekwon's highest charting song on the Billboard Hot 100 as a leading artist, he didn't like the song. He loved the beat, but the only thing that he didn't like about this song is that he felt like the song Ice Cream was too soft for the album. Even Ghostface felt like Ice Cream was that song, but Ray just was not feeling it and he felt like it was too soft and he needed everything on the album to be hard and gutter. It's a good thing that this track came to be because it's one of, if not the most popular songs Raekwon has ever done as a leading solo artist. RZA takes total credit for the idea behind the song. RZA had been working with Method Man and he told him a crazy idea that he had about girls being different types of ice creams. He says that this was the first song besides Method Man's song All I Need to Get By that he pressured him to do. The reason why is that Meth didn't want to be the pretty boy. Method Man would do his hook on the song the same week that he did his verse for GZA's song Shadow Boxing. He talked about RZA coming up with the concept of calling girls different ice cream flavors and making t-shirts with different flavors on them. Chocolate Deluxe, Butter Pecan Recan, French Vanilla, Caramel Sundae, etc. RZA said that they must have sold 20,000 t-shirts from the Wu Wear store alone. It was RZA's vision, but Meth brought it to life on the hook. Meth didn't even know that Capadonna was on the song. He didn't find out until the album was done. The reason why is because RZA wouldn't let people take stuff with them. If you were working with him, you had to listen to a song as much as possible because after that night, you weren't going to hear it until it was finished. As noted earlier, Capadonna would first appear on Ice Water, but Ice Cream would be the song that put him on the map. Capadonna wasn't even going to be on the track at first, but he joked with RZA about him getting on the track, and RZA took this seriously. He told him to go ahead and get on it, and the rest is history. Wu Gambinos would be the 16th track on the album, and as mentioned earlier, the Gambinos is in reference to the Gambino crime family. Raekwon has said that the Wu Gambino aliases came from how it used to like the movie Once Upon a Time in America with Robert De Niro and James Woods. He also notes that the name Tony Starks came from the movie Iron Man, while Lou Diamond came from Ray being infatuated with the diamond world. Back then, he was wearing a lot of jewelry. He soon started to give his partner names. Some examples are Noodles, which is in reference to Master Killer, GZA being Maximilian because he was the brains of the crew, Inspector Deck was Rolly Fingers because of the way that he rolled blunt, U-God was Golden Arms, etc. RZA said that the story in terms of this album was that the guys had pulled their sting off, but they had one more. With this last one, they had to call in the heavy hitters. This track was done 11 songs deep into the album. Everybody came with their Gambino names to fit the concept of the album. True Master had to be the engineer to record RZA while he was doing his verse. RZA would use this track to be heard because in his words, he hadn't been heard in a while. He wanted to let people know that he was a part of this thing too, and he was coming for the money. Heaven and Hell would be the second to last song on the album and would be one of the first songs done for the album due to it being made for the Fresh soundtrack, which was released the year before, only built for Cuban Linx. The Heaven and Hell beat is one of Ray's favorite beats. The hook for the song was one that him and Capadonna came up with way back in the day before the album was released. He called the song Heaven and Hell because we as people want to be in heaven, but we're living in hell. The last song on the album would be North Star Jewels. This is a track that Ray really wanted on the album because he felt the vibe of it was like a motion picture. Papa Wu would appear on the track, and for those who don't know, he played a pivotal part in the history of the group behind the scenes. Rest in peace, Papa Wu. And Ray said that what he was saying on the track was more or less giving a documentary of him with the words that he was saying. About the track, RZA would say Fly Beat, Ish, and North Star were one track at first, but he soon separated them. The idea behind the track was that Ray did everything that he had to do. Everything is now over. The job is over. The mission is over. It's a perfect closing to the album. But about this track, there's some debate about whether ODB appeared on the song or not. He's not credited on the song, but people claim that he's singing in the background of the song. Raekwon in an interview will say that ODB was on it, but people still think that ODB is not on the song. I've even heard people say that it's Papa Wu singing in the background. All in all, let me know what you guys thought of the video. I'm really glad that I redid this video, and for those who saw the original video, can see the progression in my work since. This was definitely one of my favorite videos to make, and I definitely look forward to remaking my videos on Liquid Swords and Supreme Clientele down the line. I love you guys with all my heart. Peace.